So I was thinking to myself, was 2022 a good year in boxing? I can't remember. So let's have a look back at the full year and see what happened. We actually got treated to boxing on the first day of the year, January the 1st. And it was a good one. Luis Ortiz came off the deck twice to score a 6th round knockout of former IBF champion Charles Martin up at heavyweight. Ortiz, 42 years old at the time, was really showing his age. He's creaking with age, but he still caught up with Martin for a good win. On the undercard, Cuba's Frank Sanchez remained unbeaten as he sleepwalked through a 10-round point decision over Christian Hammer. Didn't get off at a first gear, didn't come out neutral, just easily outboxed him. Boring stuff. Sanchez, you keep fighting like that, you're just not going to get any big fights, mate. Elsewhere in the month, on the 15th, Joe Smith Jr. battered Stephen Jeffrard over 9 rounds to defend his WBO light heavyweight title. An easy first defence against an unknown opponent. Smith just was too strong, just beat his Jeffrard up. There was a big upset, however, on the 22nd in Atlantic City, as Filipino Mark Magsayo ended the longest championship reign in professional boxing up to that stage of Gary Russell, beating him on points over 12 rounds to win the WBC Featherweight Championship. Russell is a really brilliant fighter. He's so quick, but he's so inactive, it's embarrassing. He fights like once every year and it's terrible. Still, he would have defeated Mayagso, I imagine, had he not injured his shoulder very early in the fight. Mayagso, however, took advantage, was aggressive. He'd earned his title shot with a big win over Julio Cesar of Mexico in August, and his aggression allowed him to pick up the victory. The final, merely dull January, we jumped into February. We've got a big domestic fight in the UK as Chris Eubank Jr. squared off against Liam Williams. Both world-class middleweight contenders, looked a great fight on paper, but Eubank was too good for Williams. Williams put on the pressure throughout, but Eubank kept dropping him with counters, scored 3 knockdowns and won it easily on points. On the undercard, Otto Wallin, famous for giving Tyson Fury a tough fight, got a points decision over Kamil Sokolowski. Presumably I'm pronouncing that right. There was also a big upset in February as John Ryder outscored former middleweight champion Daniel Jacobs over 12 rounds. Jacobs, the Miracle Man, appeared a little unlucky to lose on points, but as with everyone, he struggled with Ryder, who got in close and worked hard. And Ryder came through with a 12-round decision that'll get him a big fight by the end of the year. In Manchester, we finally got the much-awaited grudge match between Kell Brook and Amir Khan. The build-up to this fight was fantastic, and the fight lived up to expectations, even though it was 3 or 4 years too late, possibly longer. Brook could take Khan's power, and he just laid a beating on Khan, stopping him in 6 exciting rounds. Khan was game throughout, but just outclassed. Beautiful sportsmanship between the pair after the match. Both men would announce their retirements after the fight, which I think it's safe to say was the best thing for both men. On the undercard of this one, we got Frazier Clark, bronze medalist in the Super Heavyweight Olympics last time out, scoring a 1-round knockout of Jake Darnell. On February 26th, we saw one of the most controversial decisions of the year, as Josh Taylor defended his WBA, WBC, IBF and WBO Super Lightweight titles with a 12-round split decision over Englishman Jack Catterall. Taylor was really confident before this fight and was a big favourite after his successes recently. He's defeated the top men in the division. He'd entered the pound-for-pound list. He'd unified the division. But Catterall, unbeaten but untested at this level, outboxed him for much of the fight and seemed extremely unlucky to lose a split decision. A rematch is on the cards and it is well deserved, as Catterall should have taken those titles that night. Away from Glasgow and on to Las Vegas, where Hector Luis Garcia outscored Chris Colbert over 12 rounds, and Fernando Martinez won the IBF Super Flyweight title, outscoring Jerwin Ancajas. WBO Cruiserweight champion Lawrence Okolie continued to waste time as he outscored Mikhail Chislek over 12 dire rounds, very messy fight. Okolie hasn't fought since because he's arguing with his promoter Eddie Hearn. What a waste. Where in the fourth match, Jose Ramirez, one of the best fighters in the division, won a close decision, close but clear, over Jose Pedroza to keep himself in the running for a title shot. Elsewhere, the ageless Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez really turned on the style to outscore Julio Cesar Martinez over 12 rounds Another great performance by Chocolatito, who a few years ago just appeared absolutely finished, and he just absolutely schooled Martinez, who was on fantastic form coming in. Hall of Fame worthy fighter, Chocolatito, still fantastic. Lee Wood scored one of the most dramatic wins of the year when he defended his WBA regular featherweight title. How laughable. With a 12th round stoppage over Michael Conlan. Mickey Conlan, amateur star, very popular Irish fighter, was boxing excellently. Beautiful southpaw boxing. But Wood was relentless, driven on by the Nottingham crowd, his home crowd obviously. And he knocked Conlan out of the ring and out of the fight in the 12th round of a battle he was losing. Staring stuff, great win for Lee Wood. Over in Wembley on March 19th, we got a farcical fight which was shown on BT Sport as David Avevesian, the European welterweight champion, scored a one-round knockout of Askari Metz. God, this was embarrassing. Oh, I don't know where they found Metz, but he had no right to be in the ring with somebody as good as Avevesian. March 19th, Sonny Edwards, one of England's best fighters, outscored Mohamed Wasim over 12 rounds for the IBF flyweight title. Edwards, an excellent boxer, is going to take some real beating. He's probably the best in the flyweight division at the moment and one of the best in England. He's very much an unsung hero, great little fighter. Elsewhere on the undercard, Regis Prograis, who I think is one of the best super welterweights in the world, and he's a super fighter, absolute superb box fighter, stopped Irishman Tyrone McKenna in 6th to keep himself very much in the frame. Elsewhere, in Los Angeles, Alexis Roja stopped Blair Cobbs in 9 rounds at welterweight. In the First Direct Arena in Leeds, we got a big show. Josh Warrington rebounded to take the IBF featherweight title, stopping old rival Kiko Martinez in 7 rounds. On the undercard, Maxie Hughes continued his career resurrection as he outscored Ryan Walsh over 12. Maxie Hughes is one clever boxer and he's really coming to his own in the twilight of his career. Underneath that, the sexiest lady in boxing, Ebony Bridges, outscored Maria Cecela Roman for the IBF bantamweight title. Bridges not only looks good, but she is a tough girl. Richard Riakporhe continued his winning ways with his 8th round stoppage of Dion Juma. Savannah Marshall scored a 3rd round stoppage in a defence of a WBO middleweight title against Femik Hermans. On April 9th, over in Japan, Gennady Golovkin kept his career alive just as he overcame some really difficult moments in the early rounds against the aggressive Ryota Murata in a fight for the WBA and IBF middleweight titles. Golovkin slowly chipped away at Murata, eventually wearing him down in 9 exciting rounds. But this wasn't the Golovkin of years gone by. Over in Texas, Ryan Garcia, Stingray, won a really one-sided points decision over Manuel Tago. Also that night, we got another exciting fight over in Las Vegas. One of the best fights of the year, as a towering inferno, the enormous Sebastian Fundora overcame some really tough moments to score a dramatic 9th round stoppage over Erickson Lubin. It looked like Lubin would win the fight, but Fundora pulled it out of the fire. Brilliant stuff by both men. Fundora, he looks about as threatening as Napoleon Dynamite, but he's a great fighter and he's a really tough kid and deserves a big fight. On the undercard, Tony Harrison, former light middleweight world champion, kept his name in the frame with a points decision over Sergio Garcia. On April 16th in Manchester, the AO Arena, Conor Benn, boo, scored a 2nd round stoppage over Chris Van Hardeen. This fight should be looked upon suspiciously now, but yeah. Anyway, moving on. On the undercard, Chris Billam-Smith scored his 2nd win over Thomas McCarthy for the European Cruiserweight title. This time, Smith scored an 8th round stoppage, improving on the points winning he previously picked up over McCarthy. Good stuff by Smith, who continues to improve. So that night, in one of the biggest fights of the month, over in Texas, Errol Spence Jr. unified the WBA, WBC and IBF welterweight titles with a 10th round stoppage over Yordenis Ugas. Some of the body shots that Spence was driving into Ugas were absolutely savage. Ugas must be made of iron. He was really tough but outclassed. A phenomenal performance by Spence. who confirmed that he's not just one of the best welterweights in the world, he's one of the best boxers, period, in the world. On April 22nd in Liverpool, Paul Butler won the WBO interim bantamweight title, outscoring Jonas Sultan over 12 rounds. Butler using those boxing skills which he's famed for. Good stuff. April 23rd, in Wembley Stadium, Tyson Fury returned to the ring to defend his linear and WBC heavyweight championship in what he said was his retirement fight. Obviously, that's gone out the window. With a 6th round stoppage over Dillian Whyte. Fury, way too good for Whyte, easily outboxed him before scoring a highlight reel knockout with an uppercut and a big old shove. On the undercard, Tommy Fury, Tyson's brother, famous for Love Island in the UK, got another victory, didn't look very impressive. And Cole Usman outscored Darren Tetley for the British and Commonwealth welterweight titles. In a highly anticipated clash over at the MGM Grand for the WBC and WBO Super Featherweight title, Shakur Stevenson proved that he is indeed for real as he outscored Mexico's tough Oscar Valdez over 12 rounds. Excellent boxing by Stevenson, such a sharp, classy southpaw, definitely one of the best in the business at the moment. On April 30th in the MSG, Katie Taylor won a split decision of Amanda Serrano in a fantastic fight for the WBA, WBC, IBF and WBO lightweight titles. Both ladies put on a truly cracking performance, and yeah, it'll do wonders for women's boxing. On the undercard of this one, Liam Smith turned in one of his best performances. He ground down, wore down and stopped Jesse Vargas in 10 rounds. On May 7th from the T-Mobile Arena, we got one of the biggest upsets of the year as pound for pound king Canelo Alvarez was outscored over 12 rounds by Russia's Dmitry Bivol. Before the fight, it looked stylistically to be all wrong for Canelo, and in the ring it proved to be so. Canelo tried to bully Bivol, but Bivol was excellently schooled. On May 13th in London, Denzel Bentley outscored Linus Odofi for the British middleweight title. While in May 14th, there was a big upset as Olympic gold medalist Tony Yoka took an absolute hammering against the enormous Martin Bakole. Bakole absolutely pummeled Yoka, and Yoka deserves enormous credit for somehow getting to the belt. How it was called a majority decision, I have absolutely no idea. Bakole battered the kid, but props for Yoka for going the distance. Great win by Bakole. It should get him a big fight. On May 14th in Los Angeles, one of my favourite boxers in the world right now, Jermell Charlo, unified the WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO and linear light middleweight championship. Oh, super welterweight if you want to call it that. With a 10th round stoppage in his rematch over Brian Castano. As he tends to do, Charlo made adjustments in the rematch and scored an epic 10th round stoppage. Great fighter. If you haven't seen him, go and look him up. He's great. Always in exciting fights. On the undercard, one of America's top prospects, Jaron Ennis, nicknamed Boots, I like that nickname, scored a 2nd round stoppage of Acosta Clayton. Easy work for the big hitting and classy Ennis. Just a matter of time before he picks up his world title. On May 14th, we got a Triller Fight Club card, and I enjoyed this one. In the main event, Sergey Kovalev outscored former Olympic bronze medalist Bulgaria's Tervel Pulev over 12. Pulev tried to put the pressure on, but Kovalev, even now an excellent boxer behind that left jab, soundly outboxed his man over 10 rounds. In the other big fight, Tervel Pulev's brother Kubrat, long-time heavyweight contender, kept his name in the frame as he soundly outscored Jerry Forrest over 10 rounds. A good result for Pulev as Forrest was coming off that excellent draw with Michael Hunter. But Pulev won soundly on points. Excellent performance. On May 21st at the O2 Arena, Joshua Buatsi, one of Britain's best prospects, stepped up to world level against Craig Richards, who famously gave Dmitry Bivol problems in his world title fight, and won on points over 12 tough rounds. Great learning fight for Buatsi. Good matchmaking by Eddie Hearn. Good stuff. On June 4th in Cardiff, the forgotten man of Welsh boxing, Joe Cordina, won the IBF Super Featherweight title with a dramatic 2nd round stoppage of a Kenichi Ogawa. Highlight reel knockout by Cordina, coming right out of left field, and it's put his name very much in the frame. And on June 7th, we got the highly anticipated rematch between Naoya Inoue and Nonito Donaire. The first fight was an absolute classic, but this time it would just be a massacre. Inoue, a devastating puncher, got a second round stoppage over Donaire. One-sided stuff, held on to his WBA, WBC and IBF bantamweight titles, and confirmed that he's one of the best in the world at any weight. In Wembley Arena, Richard Riakporhe kept busy, second round stoppage of Fabio Terci up at cruiserweight. Same with Vidal Rowley, a 1-round stoppage win for him. Over on June 11th in Miami, Florida, Don King reared his head again, as Daniel Dubois, an English heavyweight prospect, travelled there to stop Trevor Bryan in 4 one-sided rounds to win the WBA regular, give me strength, heavyweight title. And then afterwards we found out that King didn't pay Dubois his money. So, Don King being Don King there. On June 11th, Jaime Munguia kept busy for Golden Boy as he scored a 5th round stoppage over Jimmy Kelly. This was another bad match on paper, but Kelly gave Munguia problems. Well, Munguia just needs to fight some decent fighters. But he caught up with his man in the end, but unimpressive stuff. What wasn't unimpressive was on the 18th of June when champion Artur Beterbiev, the linear champion, the true champion in the weight class, squared off against WBO champion Joe Smith Jr. and absolutely wrecked him in 2 rounds. Beterbiev, an enormous puncher. Him and Bivol is one of the best fights we can make in the whole of boxing. 2 mad Russians. And on June 25th from San Antonio, Texas, Jesse Rodriguez continued his excellent form, scoring an 8th round stoppage of Asistokrat Saw Rungvisai. This was a great win by Rodriguez. Rungvisai is probably going into retirement, but good win indeed. On the undercard, Murajan Akhmadaliev scored a 12th round stoppage over Ronnie Reyes for the WBA and IBF Super Bantamweight titles. A contest between him and Stephen Fulton is highly anticipated, and Jessica McCaskill scored a 3rd round stoppage over Alma Ibaria for the WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO welterweight titles. On July 2nd, Joe Joyce, the Juggernaut, lived up to his nickname with a 4th round stoppage of Christian Hammer. The British heavyweight contender shrugged off Christian Hammer's best shots like we'd shrug off the rain. One thing's for sure though, he won't get away with it forever. He needs to tighten up those defences. On the undercard, Zolani Tete returned with a 4th round stoppage of Jason Cunningham. Cunningham had been in good form going into the fight, but anyone who's seen Tete fight knows that he is like a cobra. Too classy and too much power for Cunningham. On July 9th, Derek Chisora kept his career alive with a debatable 12-round split decision of Kubrat Pulev. Del Boy countered with some huge shots. It was exciting stuff, especially in the last round, but Pulev seemed to have done enough for me. Bit of a gift there for Chisora, but it would earn him a big fight later in the year and a big payday against Tyson Fury. Also that night, Ray Vargas ended the short reign of Mark Magsaw, outscoring him over 12 round. Vargas, a tall, rangy featherweight, just outboxed him. Simple as that. On July 16th, Golden Boy's Golden Boy, Ryan Garcia scored a 6th round stoppage of Javier Fortuna at lightweight. The pet left hook of Garcia doing the damage. On July 30th, over in Bournemouth, Chris Billam-Smith continued his winning ways, winning a close decision in a very tough fight over Isaac Chamberlain for the European and Commonwealth Cruiserweight titles. Fraser Clark was also in action on the undercard, as was another British prospect, Ben Whittaker. On July 30th, Danny Garcia got his name back into the frame with a points decision over Jose Benavides Jr. Garcia was an excellent counterpuncher, won a good decision, proved he's still got a lot left to give. On August 6th, Dalton Smith, British prospect, scored a 6th round stoppage of Samuel Mason for the British lightweight title. Over in Belfast, Michael Conlan returned following that devastating knockout defeat with a 10 round decision over Miguel Mariaga. Good performance by Conlan on the comeback trail. On August 6th, Virgil Ortiz Jr. defeated the previously unbeaten Michael Mixon in Texas. Ortiz, one of the best prospects in the whole of boxing, is a poised and deadly box puncher. Mickinson, as talented southpaw, very awkward was game, but outclassed. Didn't have the power to keep him off. On August 13th in Las Vegas, Teofimo Lopez, the former lightweight champion of the world, returned and looked very good, scoring a 7th round stoppage of Pedro Campo. But Campo was absolutely made to order for Lopez, but it was still a good comeback performance. On August 20th in Saudi Arabia, we got the much anticipated rematch, Alexander Usyk versus Anthony Joshua. Again, Usyk just too good a boxer for Joshua. Joshua tried to be more physical, tried to put on more pressure, and at one stage in the middle rounds, it looked like that pressure was going to tell, but Usyk rebounded so well and took the running away from Joshua. And after 12 rounds, Usyk had won a split decision. Hopefully a match between Usyk and Tyson Fury can now be made for all the gold. On the undercard, Callum Smith scored a 4th round stoppage of a Mateo Budelik at light heavyweight. An exciting little fight. Smith always in exciting fights. Up at heavyweight, we had one of the best heavyweight prospects in the world, allegedly. Former amateur star Filip Hrgović outscoring Zhilei Zhang, one of the worst heavyweight prospects in the world, over 10 rounds. But I thought Zhang won this fight. He simply got in close, used his strength, and pretty much bashed Filip about. Still, Hrgović came back late when Zhang was exhausted, and it got him through on the scorecards. On September 3rd in Liverpool, Liam Smith returned to the ring to stop Hassan Mwakinyo. I think that's right. Let's see that again. Mwakinyo in 4 rounds. Smith was just starting to warm up, and Hassan basically quit. So not a lot was gleaned from this, and it looked a really interesting fight on paper. A day later, September 4th, in the Crypto Arena in LA, Andy Ruiz remained relevant. Just had a bit too much power as he defeated the 42-year-old Luis Ortiz on point. Ortiz had his moments, but he was dropped twice. And Ruiz, with a cuddliest little face, he looks so bloody friendly in boxing, also showed that he again still has those fast hands and still throws those deadly combinations, and he still has a lot of power. On September 17th, we got another fight far too long in the making, as Canelo Alvarez returned to outpoint a sadly faded Gennady Golovkin of a 12 one-sided, extremely dull round. Golovkin now loses the series, 2 losses and 1 draw, but Golovkin deserved better than that, to be honest. He certainly won the first fight. Second one was close, and in the third one, he was just well past his best. On the undercard, Jesse Bam Rodriguez, one of the stars of the year, had a tougher than expected victory over Israel Gonzalez. Still, he won on points over 12 rounds to retain the WBC Super Flyweight title. On September 23rd, from New Jersey, Shakur Stevenson outscored Robinson Conceição in a defense of the WBC and WBO Super Featherweight title. Conceição was game, but Shakur Stevenson, as mentioned previously, one of the best fighters in the sport. He's going to take some beating. On September 24th, we got a thrilling fight as Joe Joyce simply walked through former WBO champion Joseph Parker. Joyce again lived up to that nickname, the Juggernaut. Parker landed some really big shots, but Joyce just ignored them, continued to put on the pressure, and eventually became the first man to stop Parker. Joyce is a serious threat to Usyk and to Fury. On the undercard, Amanda Serrano held on to her WBC, IBF and WBO featherweight titles, outscoring Sarah Malfold over 12 rounds. Also that night on Nottingham and a DAZN card, Maxi Hughes continued his winning ways, outscoring Kid Galahad over 12 dull rounds. Disappointing defeat for Galahad in his debut at lightweight. On the undercard, Terry Harper outscored Hannah Rankin for the WBA Super Welterweight title. On October 5th, Clarissa Shields, the greatest female boxer in history, if you listen to her, held on to her titles, outscoring Savannah Marshall in a grudge match for the WBA, WBC, IBF and WBO middleweight titles. Marshall will come again, but right now Clarissa Shields is the top dog in boxing. Female boxing, that is. On that same night over in the Barclays Center in New York, Deontay Wilder was back in the ring and knocked out Robert Helenius in 1 round. Typical Wilder, found that big shot and Helenius was out cold. In a grudge match underneath, Caleb Plant, the former IBF Super Middleweight Champion, scored a 9th round stoppage of Anthony Durrell in what was a bit of a dire fight until Plant found the shot to put Durrell away. Melbourne, Australia, we got the most unnecessary rematch in the history of boxing as Devin Haney held on to his WBA, WBC, IBF and WBO lightweight titles with a one-sided 12-round decision over the man he had beaten for the title 1 fight previously, George Kambosos Jr. Absolutely pointless. On October 29th, Katie Taylor was back in action, holding on to her lightweight titles, outscoring Karen Elizabeth Cabajal over 12 rounds. On October 29th, everyone's favourite YouTube boxer, Jake Paul, won a decision over Anderson Silva, and no one in boxing really cared. On that same night, Vasily Lomachenko was back in action, outscoring Jermaine Ortiz over 12 rounds at lightweight. Lomachenko is looking to get a title shot against Haney. That would be a very interesting fight, although I feel that Haney would defeat him. Also that night, William Zepeda outscored Jojo Diaz at lightweight on a DAZN card. On November 5th in Abu Dhabi, Dimitri Bivol was back, fresh off his victory over Canelo Alvarez, and he squared off against former WBO super middleweight champion Gilberto Ramirez. As expected beforehand, Bivol, the master boxer, was just too good a boxer for Ramirez and won it widely on points over 12 rounds. On the undercard, Chantel Cameron outscored Jessica McCaskill for the WBA, WBC, IBF and WBO super lightweight titles, while further down, Zelfa Barrett of England was looking very good in his IBF super featherweight title fight with Shavkat Rakhimov. He was winning on points, but Rakhimov just kept on coming and stopped Barrett in now. Even though he lost, I didn't think Barrett was capable of this performance, so yeah, he held his head high. On November 11th in Sheffield, Sonny Edwards, that unsung hero of British boxing, outscored Felix Alvarado in defence of the IBF flyweight title. On November 12th, Ricky Hatton returned to the ring for an exhibition with Marco Antonio Barrera. The two men pulled their punches, but it was still entertaining stuff. Underneath that, Natasha Jonas defended her WBC, IBF and WBO super welterweight titles, outscoring Marie-Eve Carey over 12 rounds. British prospect Dalton Smith outscored Casey Benjamin for the British super lightweight title, and Fraser Clark went the distance for the first time. The big heavyweight outscored Kamil Sokolowski over 12. On November 12th, it was Janabek Alekmanuli in Las Vegas, Nevada, outscoring Denzel Bentley for the WBO middleweight title. On November 19th in Telford, Anthony Yard, warming up for his contest with Arthur Beterbiev, scored a third round stoppage over Stefani Koikov in the light heavyweight bout. Underneath that, Liam Davis outscored Inoue Baluta for the European super bantamweight title. On November 19th, in a very exciting heavyweight fight, Greg Hardy, a former MMA fighter, outscored Hasim Rahman Jr. Thrilling fight, this one. Go and check it out. Also that night, but in Mexico, our mate Jaime Munguia had another easy fight, scoring a third round stoppage over the obscure Gonzalo Gasto Correa. Just 3 fights, all of them a complete waste of time. Unbelievable. November 26th, Dylan White was back in action as he outscored Jermaine Franklin over 12 tougher than expected rounds. Franklin announced himself on the heavyweight scene, but White looks a little bit jaded following that beating at the hands of Tyson Fury. Underneath, rising prospect Fabio Wardley scored an exciting third round stoppage of Nathan Gorman to win the British heavyweight title. On November 26th at the O2 Arena in London, it was supposed to be Zach Parker's coming out party as he squared off against John Ryder. However, Ryder's rich run of form continued. After 5 competitive rounds, it appeared that Ryder was just getting into his groove when Parker retired with a badly injured hand. So John Ryder wins the vacant WBO interim super middleweight title. Also that night, Regis Prograis returned with an 11th round stoppage of a Jose Zepeda for the WBC lightweight title. Prograis, in stopping Zepeda, who was a great fighter himself in 11 rounds, really showed where he stands on the world stage. As I've already mentioned, really rated one of the best in the business. On November 27th, Adnan Mazim, the big lanky puncher, scored a second round stoppage over Ryland Charlton in a super lightweight bout. On December 2nd, Josh Kelly looked very good as he won the British super welterweight title, outscoring the somewhat one-dimensional but certainly strong in game Troy Williamson over 12 rounds. On December 3rd, it was Tyson Fury versus Derek Chisora 3. On the plus side, Chisora got a payday, which is nice, but the fight was extremely one-sided. Eventually, the referee stopped it in the 10th. He should have stopped it a lot earlier. Chisora just got beat up, basically. Also on the undercard, Daniel Dubois got off the deck on 3 occasions to score a 3-round stoppage of a blown-up cruiserweight, Kevin Lerena, for the WBA regular heavyweight title. What a bloody joke. Anyway, on that same night, we got the rubber match between Juan Estrada, who won the closest of majority decisions, over Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. As close as you like. Chocolatito could have got the decision. I think we need a 4th fight on this one. On December 10th, Mickey Conlan was back, scoring a first round KO of a former 2-time European champion, Karim Gaffai. Good performance there by Conlan, who has rebounded well since that loss earlier in the year. Meanwhile, in the first direct arena, Luis Alberto Lopez of Mexico dethroned IBF featherweight boss Josh Warrington by 12-round majority decision. A hard-fought fight, with Lopez having to see off a really strong final few rounds by Warrington to get across the line. Very entertaining scrap, this one. Underneath that one, we had a grudge match which saw Ebony the Blonde Bomber Bridges score an 8th round TKO over Shannon O'Connell. Bridges overcame a rocky first round and just relentless pressure eventually wore down and stopped O'Connell. Over in Madison Square Garden in New York, Gerard the Real Big Baby Anderson, 13 wins no losses all by knockout, stopped Jerry Forrest in 2 rounds. Over in Ohio, we finally got the return to the ring of pound-for-pound king Terence Bud Crawford, as he successfully defended his WBO welterweight title with a 6th round stoppage over David Avanesian. Avanesian had definitely earned this title shot, and he made it tricky for 5 rounds, but then Crawford knocked him cold with a hook. We need much better for Crawford, however. A talented fighter like him cannot be stuck on the bloody shelf all bloody year. Awful. Meanwhile, in the other big fight from the night from the Garden, our mate Teofimo Lopez got a 10-round split decision over Sandor Martin. Lopez, who looked to be such a sensational fighter when he outscored Vasily Lomachenko, really struggles with movement, and Martin gave him a lot of movement, a lot of angles, dropped Lopez in the second. Lopez was more aggressive, and it got him the win on the cards, but it was far from convincing, and a lot of people thought Martin won. And the scorecards that came back from the judges were absolutely horrendous. Naoya Inoue was back to square off against Paul Butler. Butler, a clever boxer, decided to avoid Inoue, trying to minimise contact with him. Probably the strategy being the longer he was in the ring, the more likely a natural disaster was to befall him. But it didn't happen. Inoue caught him up and stopped him in 11 rounds. Rising British light heavyweight prospect Dan Aziz cut down Rocky Fielding in 8 rounds. And Chris Billam-Smith, in front of his Bournemouth crowd, had a lot of problems with Armand Zuzag or something like that, but he found the shots to score a highlight reel knockout in the 5th round. Integrity and boxing are words that really don't go hand in hand with each other. But when I was growing up, your journalists, your commentators, they did have integrity. They used to watch boxing, and if it was a bad fight, they'd bloody call it. But now, that integrity has absolutely disappeared. I listen to some of these commentators and these analysts claiming that these are good fights that we're watching, and it's absolute garbage. It's rubbish, and anyone who knows anything about boxing knows this. Obviously, I understand why they're doing it, they're getting paid, but it's awful. There's a reason that Eddie Hearn gets booed every time he appears in England. It's because he's a greedy twat who makes terrible fights. They have shitty undercards, and what makes it worse is that he's got loads of talented fighters sitting on the shelves not doing anything when they could be fighting on his undercards and staying active. I would say it's been a terrible year for boxing. Big fights haven't been made, great fighters are stuck on the shelf, the fights that have been made are awful. I don't know, these DAZN cards that they're coming out with are really poor most of the time. Yep, 2022 has not been a good year for boxing, but I'm hoping that 2023 things will change and we'll get some of those big fights made.